Bundalo. Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and welcome to the library. Today, I am incredibly excited about the video we're covering, but we're going to take the energy level down now. We're going to bring it on back, because quite frankly put, we got to make this concise. Today is Battle Royale number 21, the last in the Conan part of these series where we're actually comparing two different comic adaptations of a Conan story written by Robert E. Howard. Today is the finale for the Queen of the Black Coast. You saw the thumbnail back there, it's what brought you here. Now I'm gonna warn you ahead of time. If you're watching this video, go find this video first. This is Battle Royale number 20. What I'm gonna do today to make this one a little faster, is we're gonna reference back to that one a lot. In that one, we compared the Marvel and the Ablaze versions of Queen of the Black Coast. Now, in that, Marvel clearly won it hands down. But if you want the synopsis of what happened in Queen of the Black Coast, I'm going to refer you back to that. If you want to see the page by page on the Marvel adaptation on that, I'm going to refer you back to that. Now, without any further ado, let's get into today. Today, winner, Marvel from Battle Royale number 20, taking on the Dark Horse adaptation of Queen of the Black Coast. All right, now you guys know what we do on these things. We're going to turn the camera around, we're going to look down, we're going to go through the Dark Horse ones page by page. The Marvel ones, go watch the other video. All right, let's get into it. All right, so let's talk about administration. Let's talk about what, really. I think what's the big question. Why, that's probably another good one. Who? No, we know who, it's me. Okay, here's the deal, guys. What were we covering here in Battle Royale number 20? Well, we were covering select books from Marvel versus the entire Ablaze mini-series. And the reason why we chose select books from the Marvel run is because, well, Belit, as we're pronouncing her here in these videos, watch number 20 if you want to know why, she was in a lot of books. Marvel had her in issue number 58 all the way up to issue number 100. Dark Horse in their run with Conan had her in Conan the Barbarian number 1 all the way up to number 25. Like, those are a lot of stories that involve the character, but not all of that is Robert E. Howard material. Most of that is infill from the time where Conan becomes, well, Amra, or the king, to Belit being the queen, all the way up to the point where they go up that blasted river, which none of us are happy with, because we know what happens when you go up that river, and literally, we're not going to talk about how much I cry reading this story, okay? The bottom line is it's bad news bears, and we'll get to more of that later. But what are we including? Well, on that one we did 58 and 100, so on this one we're going to make it concise again. For the Dark Horse adaptation, I'm only including Conan the Barbarian numbers 1 through 3, as well as issues number 22 through 25, which means really the two books that Marvel did this in, Dark Horse is doing it in 7. So there's going to be some page flip in here. Now, this is where we get into some administration about where's the content. Where's the beef, Tennessee Fats? Well, I'll tell you where the beef is. It's in that video, number 20. In that, I walked through what the Robert E. Howard story was, and I went into great details, and I talked about how this is my favorite Robert E. Howard story of all times. You simply cannot top this story in my mind for Robert E. Howard works. We're not going to do that again. If you want to know what happens in the story, go check that out. The other thing we did there is we already did the page by page for the Marvel 2 books that we included. If you want to know what's in those, go check that out. What we're going to do here today is I'm just going to walk through the Dark Horse adaptations as they are represented in these wonderful hardcover editions, which I love. These are fantastic. Then we're going to come back and do a wrap-up. So if you haven't checked out number 20, you're probably going to be lost on the wrap-up. As we always do, there's going to be chapters in these videos. If you want to skip on through, skip on through. I know I take a long time to get there. It's part of my charm. Let's get into the Dark Horse books. All right, it is time to get into these stories, and it's time to get into the Dark Horse adaptation. Now, as you guys know, on these videos, we always turn these cameras around when doing the Battle Royale, where we go through the page by page. Now, what I'm not doing in this video, and I didn't even do it at the beginning, is the obligatory spoiler alert that I throw in every one of these videos, because we've gotten to Battle Royale number 21 at this point in time. If you don't know what's going to happen here, really? All right, here's what we're going through. Now, I gave up on trying to find these individual issues from the Dark Horse ones ages ago because they are so bloody difficult to find. So annoying. So I said, forget it. I'm just going to start collecting the hardcovers. And these are stunning. Absolutely stunning. I think these were a great quality product. And I'm glad I've got at least, what have I got? These 5 of these in total right now? 5. I have 5 of these in total right now. I think I still have some more to get, actually. But that's a story for another day. Now, I posted on YouTube a while back as a post, and I said this was my reading for the evening, because we knew where we were going with these. And you guys positively responded to that, and I thank you for that. This was not the reading for an evening. This was the reading for 2 evenings, because quite frankly, I had to stop and put this aside. After reading this entire thing, oh, it literally broke me. But you know what? We'll put that in an Easter egg at the end of the video, because today we're staying on target. So, volume number 13 is what has issues number 1 through 6 of the Conan the Barbarian series from Dark Horse. So let's start going through issues number 1 through 3 right now. So the story opens up with, oh, beautiful image there. But Conan is in Mysantia. He's riding his horse. This opens very similar to what Robert E. Howard had, because he starts off with his horse tearing through town. And there's a lot of dialogue at this part of the story which really talks about the class differences between the rich and the poor in Mysantia. And this becomes a common theme that you don't see anymore in the Queen of the Black Coast story itself, which is in issues 1 through 3 of this book. But you'll see it in the latter stories that are within here. Anyways, Conan is tearing off, and he's wearing an appropriate outfit that looks exactly like what Robert E. Howard described as he's tearing his way through town. He's heading for the port, and he stops right at the end there. You don't see the horse rearing, but you say the neigh, which infers obviously it's stopped. And then he's hopping along some logs to jump on this boat. There's a very, well, I would say terse conversation between he and Tito at this point in time, where he actually puts the sword to Tito's throat. That was a little aggressive. But at the same time, he explains, okay, this is what I'm here for because I've got nothing to hide. I have nothing to steal. See it down there. Happens actually in this page. But he says he's going to pay with steel. And Tito, being rather intelligent with a sword to his throat, says, yeah, okay, I have no love of the Argosians. Let's go. Conan then explains how he came to be riding on that horse, how he came to be in a bar where somebody was seeing him with the other fellow. He didn't tell the other person what happened. Spent the night drunk in a jail, basically. Hauled into court where he wasn't doing the best of himself, let's put it that way, until he actually kills the magistrate and then steals a horse. And they all laugh, and this kind of makes the crew like him, and everything seems to go well from there. They are heading south along the coast, and in this instance, what you see is Tito explaining, oh, by the way, that over there, that's Stygio. We're going past it right now. We're heading down to Kush, by the way, which you knew. But we've passed all these other places, and Conan's like, I can't see anything. He's like, no, I can tell by the stars. So you don't really see the shoreline, which is what Conan saw during his Robert E. Howard journey when he was heading south. At this point in time, Tito starts to explain what a Belit is. And a woman, yes, she is. And she's the worst thing you could possibly imagine. And she slaughters everything. And Conan starts to have these visions. Now, what's interesting about the Dark Horse story, and I'm going to come back to this repeatedly, is there's a variety of visions within the Dark Horse story that are within young Conan's mind that are absolutely fascinating. And this is the vision right off the bat where he starts to already picture Belit. And amazingly enough, this is exactly it. It's like it was meant to be. Dark Horse really does a good job leading up to that. Anyways, they end up heading south and they get to Kush, and of course nothing's being traded. And, the issue is that Belit is sacking everything. And Conan has to admit, well, you can't go back north to Argos, that's my fault. Point me towards Belit and I'll finish her off. And Tito's like, no, I can't ask that of you. You're a fool. You're going to come with me, and we're just going to continue to head south, and we'll trade as best we can. Conan kind of has to eat crow on that one, because he doesn't like the idea of running. But he still says, all right, fine, I'll go along with you. You're a friend of mine. I like the crew. Away we go. They head on out, and they see another ship, and unfortunately, well, fortunately for them, it's not the Tigress. Unfortunately for Conan, who's already starting to be a little bit mysticized by this whole Belit person at this point in time, he's a little disappointed. The ship is utterly wrecked, and they recognize it as the work of Belit, and Conan does not. So he dives overboard and goes over to see if the place has just been utterly trashed. Everybody's dead. Kind of interesting. And then another vision. Another vision of her coming up, kissing him, and then taking him down into the waters. Obviously a dream, because he awakes, he's surrounded by the fog, and he sees this other ship, and lo and behold, he discovers that it is in fact the Tigress, because lo and behold, what does he see? Belit, looking exactly like he expected her to. He raises an alarm. That's the end of issue number 1. Chapter number 2, let's get into that bad boy. Again, the vision. A vision basically of Belit saying, listen, you've kind of beaten me, but you haven't killed me yet. Is that all you got? You really have to do better. Interesting how these visions keep mixing in, and it really does kind of show the inner logic of Conan as he's working his way through the story. Then we cut back to real life. There's a battle going on. The Tigress is coming. You're going to get you before you get to shore. Because Tito has said, well, we'll row to shore. It's like, no, this isn't going to work. Give me a bow and at least I'll whittle him down. And they do chase one another, and he starts opening fire. And he does start picking off various people in Belit's crew. And it's interesting that as he's picking away, Tito's continuing to scream at his team to row because he somehow thinks he's going to get to shore. And Conan does this wonderful scene here, which is actually the Robert E. Howard piece, where he's got it lined up and he sees you, She-Devil, draws it off, but at the last second pulls away. Now, I gotta tell you guys, I've done a fair amount of archery in my life. Let me tell you, there are a lot of points when you've got that thing fully drawn where you could draw off in a variety of ways. This, I don't know. I'll give it to Robert E. Howard. I'll give it to the story. Could you have pulled off at that last second to purposely hit the person next? That's a toughie. He's got to be a master marksman to have pulled that off. But, again, or perhaps some whim or qualm where he doesn't want to. And Tito's very impressed. Like, you almost got her. And you can see the look on his face when he actually swears to himself. When he releases, it's like, oh, he did hit the person next to Belit. He continues picking away, and Tito is cheering him on, and they're getting closer to shore, but still too far away, when Tito is taken down exactly as Robert E. Howard suggests. A battle then ensues where Conan rallies up the men to fight, because they're not going to make it to shore. And it starts, and this turns into a slaughter. It's very clear that the crew is utterly destroyed in very short order, and it's just down to Conan. And they start walking through the whole idea of the battle calm, which is something Dark Horse introduced here, where they talk about Conan basically seeing everything going really slowly in front of him. And he continues to fight and do everything he needs to do with no fear of death because he can't even contemplate the idea that he could die. This is actually a very interesting part of the battle because here we have him jumping off of the Argos onto the Tigris. And he's pulled on this rope, which is a grappling hook, to yank two of these guys into the water. Now they've hit the water. At this point in time, he intelligently takes off his chainmail, because obviously it's dragging him down, and starts swimming up to them. Now, I don't know how heavy a sword is. I can't imagine that would be an easy swim. He takes these guys out underwater, and there's the sharks that take on the sinking dead men. And he pulls himself up and continues his battle on the Tigris, which is just a bloodbath. At the end of the day, he ends up cornered, very similar to what Robert E. Howard suggests. But unlike where you saw Robert E. Howard saying they were basically pulling back ready to throw spears, these guys were actually getting ready to be taunted on to continue to fight him. At this point in time, Belit comes in and says, "Stop, you fools," and starts asking the typical questions that you saw in the Queen of the Black Coast story many times on our volume 20, where it's, no, you're clearly no soft Hycurian. Where are you from? And once he says he's from Samaria, that's it. She's done. She's smitten. Game over. Make me your queen. Now, this is kind of interesting because this actually, these first two issues, kind of takes you to the point where Marvel left off in issue number 58. But they add a little bit. And this is really some background for both the character of Belit and Conan. There's a little bit of a write-up in the front where it talks about Conan coming from this harsh land, and there's a vignette of him killing a wolf. And we get back to the current time. That gives you a little bit of background on Conan, where Belit is saying, "I want you to come with me." He says, and again, he's looking back at the sinking and listing Argos. And says, "Yeah, I'll sail with you, why not? Because the men don't really seem to be that angry with me. They actually seem to be listening to you." That's kind of cool. So they finish the whole process, and Conan sits down with the shaman. And at this point in time, this character is only introduced as a shaman. We don't get a name. We get it later in the total, what I'll call the Dark Horse story that involves Belit, but we don't get it right now. And what's interesting about this is this shaman sees so much. And it's incredible. And you see more and more how powerful this shaman is over time. Where he says, well, basically, because Conan's a little disappointed. He's saying, they died because your mistress ordered it. He says, "Pardon me, Samaria, but, this is the point of you being alive. She let you live, so how about we zip it?" And at the end of the day, gives him more background information about Belit herself, but also says, "Listen, I know where you're coming from. I actually have voyaged to your homeland." And he's like, "Truly?" Which is really a cool thing. It allows them to connect. And basically, Conan has ended up with a sense of, well, this is what this Belit person is more about. At least a little bit. This person just asked you to marry them with nothing but just hearing where you're from. You might want to learn something about them. And then you have the evening as they're heading off the coast of Kush and down around the Stygian border. And where you, in Robert E. Howard's story and in the Marvel version, you have the mating dance of Belit. Here you just have them having a conversation where she draws him in. And of course, Conan just loses himself in the whole process. And he's a happy boy. He ain't complaining. And gets up later that evening to go talk to Nagoya, not Magoya as Marvel called it. And somehow his chainmail's back, even though it hit the bottom of the ocean. Not quite sure how that happened. Anyways, they have a conversation where Nagoya says, "Listen, you really don't have anything to fear from me. We're all good. I get it." Conan gets a little more information about how Belit gathered up the crew and how, to an extent, she almost liberated them from a really bad situation through her cunning and guile, which is actually really impressive. And then, of course, you have Conan sailing on, as he does with her for quite some time. And when they ask, where do you want to go, he says to the port of Nastancia. And along the way, though, you have this shaman once again coming to Conan saying, listen, you're very torn and you're battling inside yourself. Take this potion. Let's see what's inside of you. And Conan sees these visions. Now, this vision I know. This vision I know. Both of these are from other Dark Horse stories. This I think is fairly obvious. This I also think is fairly obvious. This, on the other hand, made me go, what the That opens the door to some serious questions about Dark Horse and how they were interpreting Conan and other Robert E. Howard characters in mythos. That, that's almost a Hyborian Age conspiracy theory in and of itself. Anyways, Conan is left with these visions as they head on north, and such is the Song of Belit. Now, this is where we'll stop on this, because that really does give you the last pieces of how he basically starts working with Belit. I include that issue 3 because in there you do have the point where, let's just call it Conan and Belit do decide they're going to formally become an item, and off you go. All right, there you go. So that is what's included in volume 13 of the Dark Horse collections. Let's get that out of the way. Get on to the next one. All right, here we are. We're getting to the next piece here. This is where we conclude. It concludes in volume 16 of the Dark Horse hardcovers. Again, issues number 22 through 25. Now, I use the dust jacket here to save my space. Look at this. Look at how clever. Oh, my goodness. Look at that go. Now, the story in front of this, really cool. Really, really cool. But again, not part of the Robert E. Howard story, so we'll set that aside. As I mentioned earlier, when I finished that first piece over there, that was issues 1 through 3, I did read the rest of that story, and that's what made me have to just say, okay, we're stopping. We are full stopping. I had to go downstairs and actually read a Vampirella book just to cleanse the palate. All right, but here we are. We're getting back into her now. All right, so we're picking up in issue number 22. Yes, 22. So we start off with Conan and Belit on the ship. They're heading their way down towards Kush. Well, really towards the southern coast of Kush, because they're heading specifically to the river. The river, where is it? Zarkheba, which again means death. This dialogue here, this is the river Zarkheba, which means death. And then the description of the ship that went up the river to escape from her and how she waited. Very, very similar to the Robert E. Howard story. So I'm not going to give that any hard time. So let's go and we shall sack the city. Again, no real discussion of, okay, she was waiting for Conan to come along to do it because she didn't think she could do it alone, or any of that noise, which was kind of inferred in the Ablaze version. But again, we're not facing off against the Ablaze version here, but very accurate. They head on up the river, and as they're heading up the river, they do notice how just basically creepy it is. They got eyes and sudden movement moving along the shore. It's very dark, but the river comes out, the moon comes out, but it's a blood moon. That's pretty creepy. She asks if he's afraid. He just stares on, because why would you even ask that question on Conan? And here we have what I think is a very poignant piece that Robert E. Howard wrote into this story, which is the discussion between Belit and Conan about the mysticism and how Conan really looks at the afterlife. And it's interesting in this take on it, how really disappointed Belit was with Conan's take on the afterlife. And she's like, really? You see life as nothing but suffering, and you just see gray mist in the future? And she does mention that, if anything happens, I will come back for you. And Conan responds very poignantly and says, you've been the shining light, my queen. It really just smooth. That's Rico Suave smooth. That was well played, Conan. Man, you do not just banter with swords. You banter with words. You are a clever bugger, you. Anyways, the obligatory shtupping, and the shtupping, of course, is interrupted by the giant snake that takes out the Watchman. Now, this is freaking horrifying. Look at this thing. It's not snake. It's freaking dinosaur. So it's got scales all over it. It looks like body armor. Teeth everywhere. That's just horrifying. It's using its tongue to grab the Watchman and draw it in, where it then chomps down. Look at that. Just look at the drawing of the face. So cool. And Conan starts disemboweling it. I don't know why you would have all these sort of intestines in the neck. But, it's a snake. But it doesn't look like it. No, it looks like a snake. Okay, I'll give you that. I guess there's intestines everywhere in a snake. Anyways, he reaches out to try to save the Watchman because he does value his crew, but they're already gone, and that's the end of it. He does take the watch that evening. Nothing else happens, and they awake to find the city the very next day. And they find that, unfortunately, it's a ghost city. Now, Belit is somewhat concerned here because, there was that ship that went up there and nobody made it out. So she thinks maybe somebody new has moved in because, somebody killed everybody on that ship. That's kind of weird. And Conan's like, well, whatever. Maybe it is new inhabitants, but let's just go. And they wander off. And this is where they see the spire where you've got the gorilla. And is it a bat? Is it a bird? No, it's an ape. And it's kind of funny. She makes fun of it. She says, well, if it's an ape, it's a pretty stupid one because it's got itself stuck up at the top of the spire. And then it flies away. Yeah, better we had simply cut our own throats to come to this place that's haunted. A valid point, totally out of the Robert E. Howard piece. Yeah, that's pretty damn scary. Anyways, they move on through, and of course, Belit finds the temple, and she finds the sacrificial altar where 10,000 years of rain have left the bloodstains still on it. And they have a discussion. They agree that, yes, there's probably wealth underneath it. Now, this is weird. And this is a bit of a rewrite. Because in this, you do not see Belit pulling the ruse she pulled in Robert E. Howard's piece, where Conan was initially up there trying to move this altar. And she had to call him back because she saw a snake in the grass. Well, there's no snake in the grass. It was just a ruse because she knew that her men would die pulling the lid off that altar. And lo and behold, here we have it. Yes, it does step back, and lo and behold, it does crash as they're all running. That's a big altar. She goes, I feared the old ones guarded their treasure well. So let's get the stones off these guys. No discussion of the snake, no warning. Not quite as cold-blooded as what Robert E. Howard had written into the story, which could again be twisted and seen as perhaps her being ensorcelled by the wealth and the mysticism of the place. We really don't know. Anyways, there's a giant tomb, and she dives into it and just starts hoarding off all the loot when they see, that thing's been investigated in the ship. And she's like, no, get the stuff back to the ship. Let's go. And Conan says, well, okay, you guys can get the stuff back to the ship. I'm going to go check it out because I want to see right now if he's done anything like stove in the side of the ship. Lo and behold, he hasn't destroyed the hold, but he has taken the water. The water casks are gone. And he says, I'm going to go into the jungle with search for fresh sources. And Belit here, very coolly, very well, get to it. I'll continue on here. That's the last thing these two are ever going to say to one another. Anyways, Conan goes wandering off with his men as expected. And he does say, I'm going to back check the trail here. I hear something. You guys go on ahead. And this is where some real weird interpretation can be brought into this one. Because you see, he waits because he thinks something's following him down here. And then the Black Lotus hits. Look at the way they've depicted the Black Lotus. It's like tendrils, like some sort of weird octopus or something coming at him to grab him. Now, I don't know if Dark Horse intended this to actually be tendrils of this plant are attacking him because the Black Lotus attacks, or if it's just an interpretation in his own mind of what he's seeing because he's already hallucinating. Because at no point in time does the story does it actually talk about the rest of the men being hit by the Black Lotus. That's not in the Robert E. Howard piece. It's not actually in the aftermath of this scene, even within Dark Horse's own work, which makes me kind of suspect this might just be an interpretation. Either way, though, he does succumb to it, and down he goes, and he's gone. Chapter 5, this is where the visions start. Now, these visions are very different than what Robert E. Howard envisioned. They're very different. When all the fog in his mind clears, he pictures this race of people that have built this mountain and this city and this castle. And these ruins that they're now in, back when they were in their pristine shape, these do not look like, feathered, winged, angel-type peoples. Now, granted, I'm sure Robert E. Howard never actually explicitly said angel-type people, but winged men further along, I don't know. These are ape men. Totally different. And it's funny because they've been around for so long. The ancestors of man were still in the primordial soup. So you're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions of years ago. And this race has survived. And it survived all the way up to the Hyborian Age. And it was an issue of them suffering through ice ages and the way the earth has shifted. And basically, what we're going to call, I don't know, the ancestors of dinosaurs or the descendants of dinosaurs, then moving in on the land that led to them being what they are. And how they descended over all that time to this. Very little to be spoken about, okay, they couldn't drink the water, or when they did, they got changed. It's just literally them descending over time to this level where they have now evolved to, until there's only one left. And that's where Conan suddenly awakes. And he goes off and he sees a hyena track. Now, we haven't heard any reference to the hyenas yet, because this whole dream sequence seems to have been interrupted in Dark Horse's adaptation. Lots of hyena tracks, in fact. Conan is going running after his men and trips over, lo and behold, all their stuff. He's like, what the heck? It's like they just threw all this stuff while they were retreating. And he turns because he hears a noise, and he thinks it's the ape, but it is in fact Nagora. Now, bear in mind, Conan actually has a fairly good relationship with Nagora. These two got to know one another quite well in that issue number 3 that we just finished reviewing as part of this story. And Conan is trying to get him to calm down, trying to have a conversation, but then he realizes, listen, only one of us is getting out of this alive, and I'm going to make sure it's me. And does say, well, I'm going to have to take you out. And he does do so, takes him out of the fight. But then even as he's thinking, okay, I'm just going to put you out of your misery, just stand still. I'll send you to a better place. He still continues to fight. Now this, though, is actually fairly accurate. Now this is interesting because this wasn't even in the Marvel adaptation. In the Robert E. Howard story, he attacks and impales himself on Conan's sword. That's what's happened here. That wasn't in the Marvel story. Anyway, Conan takes the time then to actually prepare him for death, actually puts him into a little shroud, and actually buries him with his sword because his ancestors did teach him you're never separated from your sword, even in death. That's kind of weird. Good, very respectful and everything, but you're kind of busy, bud. There's stuff going on. Anyways, he hears a faint female voice and then suddenly, I guess, comes out of the daze. Let's just assume maybe he was in some sort of leftover Black Lotus type thinking here, foggy brain, I don't know. And he hears a female voice and tears off to find all of his men are gone. Many with spears stabbed into them. There's his sword, and he's like, that's not good. Heads down to the ship, gets onto it, and lo and behold, there's Belit hanging from the yardarm. Not by the blood-jeweled necklace thing, but just hanging from the yardarm. Definitely looking a hell of a lot better here than she did from the wear and tear that we saw in the Ablaze version. But again, not comparing this to the Ablaze version. And then Conan goes into a blackout state. He doesn't even realize how long he's been standing on the ship before he comes to. In fact, he doesn't even come to until much later. He's prepared a pyre for her on the ship. He's thrown all of the wealth from the city that they brought back to the ship into the river. And he finally comes to finding himself over here in the ruins, waiting for the final attack. Now, he did see hyena tracks before, but we haven't actually seen the hyenas yet. And this is where things suddenly start to happen. He's waiting and suddenly comes to as something is moved out in the distance. The other thing that actually, let's go back here for a second. She is clothed in a red, let's call it a sash or a cloth. That, in Robert E. Howard's story, was Conan's original red cloth, which you'll see him wearing here on the cover of this one, which was, all the way here back in volume 13. But he lost that. But I do want to give it to them because they did take the time to put that with the red cloth. Anyways, things have moved. He's suddenly come to. He's got his bow and arrow, and he sees a whole bunch of hyenas coming. And the only thing he can think to himself is, well, I'm glad my men at least narrowed these down. Now, how he would even think that, I don't know. Because he's never seen these things. Maybe he counted footprints when he was looking at them earlier. I don't know. Anyways, the battle begins because they charge, and he just starts slaughtering them. Look at all the arrows he's left out there. He is just destroying these things to the point where a bunch of them make it there, but when he's finally out of arrows, there's only 3 left, which is actually what Robert E. Howard intended, and 3 make it to the top. This battle here is actually incredibly accurate compared to what Robert E. Howard wrote. And I will give Dark Horse that. They got it bang on. Now, the whole rippy jawly thing here, no. The whole grabby throaty thing with a cricker, yes. The whole throwy thing, yes, absolutely. This one, probably not so much. Anyways, this happens. The beast then comes for him because it knows it's worn him down with the actual hyenas, and it attacks. This is the first time we've actually seen this thing attacking in the entire series. He does manage to slice at it, and at this point in time, as it's coming at him, and this is kind of weird, Belit suddenly appears in front of him. And she says, I told you if I was still on death, I'd still come back from the abyss. And then the basically winged ape runs through the image. I don't know if this was something that was just supposed to be seen as giving Conan the strength to continue to fight on because he was exhausted. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the intent of this was. And this is entirely different. That, well, he couldn't draw her the way that Robert E. Howard described because I'm sure, well, even with, there's no more Comics Code Authority. I guess he could. I don't know. Something very weird about that. But he does slice it in half and then promptly proceeds to stomp its head to death, which I just thought was just classic. Anyways, he rides the ship out, takes it out of the actual port because he describes how he goes back and jumps onto it. He's sort of brooding while he's on the ship as it's sailing because he's sailing the entire ship by himself. They talk about how he rode the thing down the river, wasn't interrupted, and how he headed out to sea. Now, I am choosing to include this last story in here as well, because I think this is a poignant piece, because this actually brings us to the end of the Robert E. Howard story. This one, I'm just going to quickly flip through and just give you the high levels. Effectively, Conan starts this one off as he's sitting on the shore at a nameless spot on the Kush coast, because what he's saying is, I'm not naming this because I don't want anybody to actually disturb this later on, which is fine. I totally respect that. But then we cut scenes to what he's actually doing to keep himself busy. And what he's basically doing is drinking himself to death. He's headed inland. He's found himself a village where he'll go in and he'll literally beat people to death on bets so that he can pay for booze so he can come back and then just sit and stare at the ship. And there's a lady here who keeps serving him. And she's slowly starting to get a little less and less enamored with the idea of this ghost man. And it's funny because they call him Ghost Man because they can see that he's dead inside. Anyways, he's still having horrible visions of Belit. He hasn't set fire to it yet, and he's continuing to go through this process of just beating the tar out of people to buy booze, even though he doesn't need to because there's all that wealth back on the ship. And she finally just says, are you seriously just trying to find more and more ways to find other people to hate you the way you hate yourself right now? And that message is starting to sink in. At the end of the day, we go back over here, because he actually does say, I failed you, and then he says, you're a fool, Conan. He finds himself beating on even more people until she finally loses her patience and attacks him with this. Now, where are we here? See this? See this? If you're an old school Marvel fan, this will kind of tell you that she's actually a priestess of a particular religion that we know, but we're not going to discuss it here. Pretty telling. And she coaches him out of this hatred, basically brings him to the point where she's about to beat him to death, and she says, stop, I don't want to die. Which makes him realize, okay, great. Get out of here, find a way to live your life. I'm glad you actually like yourself enough to stay alive. You come back again and I will cut your head off. And Conan then finally heads back to the shore where he then sets the pyre, burns it to the ground, and then wanders off. And it's interesting because at this point in time he does have one jewel left from the whole adventure and he throws it away. Fascinating. This whole part here, not so much. This part here where, she was the sea and it's dead to him now, quite well done. Really cool. All right, let's get into the compare and contrast parts of this one. Now, as you guys know, this is the part of the video where we actually do what we said we were going to do back in the intro at the beginning of this thing. So let's get into that part now. Now, I'm hopeful that many of you will have gone back or have previously watched the Battle Royale number 20. The image of it looks like that over there. It was a good one, and I got to tell you, I'm tooting my own horn by saying it was a good one, but I think it's deserved because, well, it's my favorite Robert E. Howard story, and to me it's a good one because I got to talk about Queen of the Black Host for a long time. That makes me happy. So let's talk about the Marvel adaptation. Let's do a high level right now of what we thought of that. The Marvel adaptation was incredibly good. I cannot get over how close it was. Besides, obviously, there were some costume changes because you had the Comics Code Authority in place. There was a little whiff there at the end of issue number 58 because the Comics Code Authority got involved and said, you can't do that. And okay, fine, I'll give you that. But really, it was bang on. The only real delta there, and this is a strange one, has to do with the fact that Conan had to go through a trial by combat before Belit was willing to say, I'll let you be the king of my ship. Now that was different, but you got to bear in mind, Marvel has a habit of doing that. For any of you who have watched the prior Battle Royale where I compared the Marvel adaptation of Hour of the Dragon to, which one was the one I was comparing it to at the time? I can't even recollect. But one of the things I pointed out in there was, again, you had a trial by combat in there that wasn't anywhere in the Robert E. Howard material. I get it. You got to put action in the comic to sell. It's Conan. I mean, how can you sell a Conan book where he's just talking? Well, Dark Horse proved you can't. But never mind that now. At the time, the thinking was that you couldn't do it. So we'll give him a mulligan on that. Otherwise, the story was incredibly good. It was so accurate, it's ridiculous. It was just mind blown. Okay, let's talk about the Dark Horse one now. The Dark Horse one, we got some deviation here. And the deviation is done in such a way that Dark Horse is attempting to make more of a personal connection between Conan and Belit before the event occurred where they actually met, at least on Conan's side. Now, I don't know. Maybe Dark Horse intended that Belit was actually having visions of Conan ahead of time as well. But it seemed to be almost one of those fated to happen things when you looked at the visions running through Conan's head. Another interesting aspect of this that was also written into the Dark Horse stories was Dark Horse at the time was going through a lot of character development for Conan, a lot of self-doubt and self-reflection, which is not something that we saw Robert E. Howard write a lot about. In fact, we saw Robert E. Howard write very little to none of that. Actually, no, Hour of the Dragon did have some, but it was only a little bit. So you don't really see a lot of that in there, but Dark Horse was purposely putting it in. The fact that the shaman was there showing Conan visions, the vision at the last one being of this winged monkey, so that Conan ahead of time knew something was coming. That gave him that sense of dread in all of his actions as he was going for it. Like, it was really, really well done in that way. But is it the same thing? Well, let's think about it. If you go for the basic mechanics, no, it's not. Conan did not rear up at the end of the wharf and then jump right off a horse onto a ship. No, he ran along a bunch of piers when he was doing it. Was his conversation with Tito as jovial as it was initially in the Robert E. Howard story? No, it wasn't. When they got down into Kush and Conan realized that he had basically screw-ed the entire ship out of trading because they couldn't now go back to Argos, and he felt so bad that he was saying, I'll go fight Belit myself. No, it didn't happen. They ran into another ship that had been sacked as opposed to a village. Not as Robert E. Howard had written it. The whole thing of heading into, well, and again, the actual process of heading up the river called death. I'll give you creative license on the depiction of a snake thing. Who cares? It's a depiction of a snake thing. When you're in the actual ruins themselves, Belit never went through the process of the setup to show the ruthlessness of her as a leader to kill her own men. She suspected, but didn't go through the ruse, right? She wasn't throwing these men out knowing they were going to go. The fact that the blood-red cursed necklace, as Robert E. Howard wrote it, isn't even in here. It almost seems like we're ignoring the fact that it was a cursed necklace. It's just not there. She's hanging from a rope from the yardarm, not from the necklace. The hyenas and all the hyena prints that were shown with the rest of the men. Like, whatever happened to the rest of the men? Are we assuming it's the hyena prints? But we know they have to slaughter. But only Nagora was the one that was there to fight them. Kind of weird. We know they dropped their weapons and ran, but I didn't really see any conclusion in that. We just assume, I guess, that they're gone. The battle at the end, though, and how Belit came back, that was materially different. And it wasn't her coming back to basically buy him time to get out from underneath a solid piece of marble. It was her coming back just as a vision to him. And at that point in time, you were saying, well, hold on. Now, is this just Conan hallucinating? Is this just the Black Lotus coming back and haunting him? Is this actually the spirit of Belit coming back? It brings into question whether it is or is not. And what was the purpose of her coming back at that point in time? Because Conan wasn't trapped under a rock. It didn't appear like he was losing that battle. It seemed like he was going whole hog and was probably doing fine. So why? I don't know. I like the last chapter on this one, and I chose to include at least just a brief discussion of that one because it really does show, at least on Dark Horse's side, the level of suffering that Conan was going through and how he blamed himself and how he apologized to Belit, or at least the corpse, and it was his fault and he was a damn fool. A variety of things, and that sense of self-loathing, and how I'm going to say that's probably a priestess that was beating the living tar out of him because she knew she had to bring him back to the right. Possibly knew what he was even going to become down the road, which is why she knew she had to do something about that. I really liked the Dark Horse version of this. I think, and again, I will give Dark Horse a lot of slack. And I think the writing on that was absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. And I think the depiction of the way they did it was just mind-blowingly good. I cannot say negative things about the work that they created. What I am going to say, though, is it did materially deviate from the original story of Robert E. Howard's in mechanics and in the way things progressed, and sometimes in the way the actual modus operandi was rolled out. To me, that just seems strange. So this is why, the conclusion of this one, I gotta say, I'm still giving it to Marvel. Even though they were subject to the Comics Code Authority, even though they put this into only 2 issues, Marvel's adaptation of Queen of the Black Coast is the closest version that I can see out there right now, and they take this one. Wow. 21 Battle Royales to get to the last one that I was so excited about doing because it's my favorite story. At the end of the day, it goes right back to a Marvel book. That just mind blown. Wow, universe has just come full circle. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up. Well, I gotta tell you, everybody, that was a lot of fun. We finally hit Battle Royale number 21. That's the last of the actual comic comparison ones that we're gonna do for any Conan stories. Well, at least until somebody else does another Conan story that's a Robert E. Howard story. Then we'll probably have to pick one up. But that's it. So cool that we ended up right back at a Marvel book. That's just awesome. It just makes me chuckle on the inside. And honestly, very freeing to actually have the last one of these done. Now, the next book, or not the next book, the next video that's in this series is just going to be us walking through the incumbents. There are a variety of Robert E. Howard stories that have been adapted into comic format, but they haven't had multiple formats. So these guys are just automatically winning. So next week we'll walk through those. We'll walk through the issues of what you want to get to actually pick up those stories. And then, I can even tell you some stories about how easy or hard a time I've had in finding those myself. Everybody, that's our video for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next one. You are the best thing. You're the best thing, baby. You are the best. That Ray LaMontagne guy, that guy's got lungs. You should respect that guy. Okay, here's the deal. We haven't done one of these Easter eggy things at the end of our videos, well, in a hot minute. But when we were shooting this video, I mentioned that we'll talk about something a little bit later. And what we're going to talk about is the second half of this book, okay? Now, there's a reason why I'm going through this. And there's a reason why I want to make you guys aware of this right now. Here's the deal, guys. When I'm reading things, I like to read them in order. And the other thing is, I like to read the whole of a story. So when I sat down and I said, okay, I'm going to read these, but here's the specific story books I'm going to include in this review, I just couldn't stop myself. I sat down and I said, I'm going to read the whole thing. Well, I did. And I read the whole thing. And it just kicked me right in the feels. This was like getting kicked in the head by a mule. Not just a subtle mule, an angry mule with a spiked hoof. I don't even think a spiked hoof exists. But if it did exist, it just hoofed me right in the head. I literally walked out of this office and wandered out there. And my eyes were so watered up. I looked like I just watched 10 of those surprise military homecoming videos on YouTube, for crying out loud. You know the ones where you walk out of the room and your wife says, what, are you having an allergic reaction? You say, I'm not crying, you're crying. That's sort of, that's exactly like literally knife, heart, dig it on out, throw it on the ground, stomp, 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 pick it back up, sew it back in. Then take the exact same rusty knife now, take it, throw it on the ground. That's how much this book hit. Now, I am going to strongly encourage any of you that are Robert E. Howard fans, that are Conan fans, particularly Conan and Belit fans. If you're like me and this is your favorite story and you like these characters that much, you totally want to get issues number 4 through 6 of the Conan the Barbarian Dark Horse series. And the reason why is because there is so much in there that builds into the relationship of Conan and Belit. It makes the whole thing hit that much harder when you get to the end. It's mind-blowing. Brian Wood, I don't think I've ever particularly spoken to you in these videos before. If you're watching this video, Brian Wood, holy crap, you are good at what you do. The writing in this thing was phenomenal. Please keep doing that. Don't ever stop. All right, let's do. Okay, listen. If you're still here now, okay, if you're still sticking around to the video this far, I figure you deserve for us to, have a bit of a chat. Listen, here's the thing, guys. If you're this far into the video, I'm assuming you're one of the Tennessee Fats loyals that are out there that actually enjoy listening to this old man ramble on like a buffoon the majority of the time. And I know I don't do anything succinctly. I think in fact, I do everything the opposite of succinct. I think I find a roundabout way to say pretty much everything with 10 words that could be done with 1. But I find that to be one of my charming features. I don't know too many other people that do, but I'm assuming some of you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here watching this part of the video. Here's the thing. Here's the deal. Here's what I want to discuss with you guys. I've had a couple emails come in, a couple messages come in, where people have asked me, because we're coming close to the end of the Battle Royales, if this means that we're done. It does not. It does not, in fact, mean that we're done. In fact, what it means is that we're going to be going and getting a little more into the rest of Robert E. Howard lore now. The next video we're going to do is going to be the incumbent video, where we're going to list all of the Robert E. Howard properties and all the stories that turned into comic adaptations, but there were no multiple comic adaptations for them. So as a result, they automatically win and become the best version you can get. They may be completely inaccurate, but if they're the only version you can get, they're the only version you can get. So we'll walk through that. Then we're going to shoot a video where we're literally going to go through a summary of all 21 Battle Royales, who won what, and the listing of, here's the list, the final list, guys, of what you want to read if you want to do comic adaptations and just get your Robert E. Howard on, without watching all 22 of the Robert E. Howard Battle Royales so far. Then we got to drive through something different. There is no more Conan to cover at that point in time, unless I want to start going into non-Robert E. Howard Conan stories, and that's a whole can of worms I'm not jumping into at any point soon. I do have several non-Robert E. Howard versions, and there are some wonderful non-Robert E. Howard Conan stories, many of which I've already discussed on this channel. But we're not going to start doing comic adaptations of those because there's still so much Robert E. Howard left to do. The next thing we're going to go on to, because some people have asked me, they've said, well, Tennessee Fats, what's next? Well, for those of you who are here, I think you deserve to know, we're moving on to King Kull. Now, I was very excited about shooting today's video. And the reason why I was is because the Queen of the Black Coast and finalizing up the Queen of the Black Coast to me is the top thing that I could do of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories. I could not top that. It makes me so happy to be able to have done that because that's my favorite Conan story. But King Kull is actually my favorite Robert E. Howard character. I know it seems somewhat odd, and I've mentioned it many times on this channel before, and it makes me sort of I know it's one of these things that makes people angry. When I say, well, I'm sorry, I prefer King Kull to King Conan. That being said, if you're talking to me about which one I prefer in their Barbarian garb, I would still say that Barbarian Conan is probably better than Barbarian Kull, at least from what I've read so far. But King Kull is the guy. So we'll be going into those. We're starting to look at the Robert E. Howard adaptations that are made in comic format that have already been produced by Dark Horse and by Marvel. And I think there might actually... No, we're not going to talk about that yet. But that's what we're going to go through next. So for those of you who are wondering, King Kull is it. Another thing I want to talk to you guys, if you're actually sticking around, you've stuck around this far into the video, and you're actually here at this point where we're into a second Easter egg on this channel and on this video, is the fact that I ramble. And I know this is something that will drive away a lot of viewers. And I know that when we're looking at videos on YouTube, and I am just as guilty of this as anybody else, when I'm looking up something about my pickup truck and I'm saying, well, hold on, how do I do that? I'd much rather watch a 3-minute video than a 23-minute video, just so I can quickly get it done. I don't get a lot of clicks for that very reason. I hope those of you that are here because you do enjoy this long, rambling format that gets us there. I find it to be a lot of fun to have these long discussions. I know many people don't, and I know it's probably losing me some viewers, but I'm comfortable with that. So for those of you who stick around and do enjoy it, I just wanted once again to say thank you. I do appreciate you, and I'm glad we're all part of the same community. Everybody, that's the last Easter egg. I promise that I'm going to stick on this video, all right? Have yourself a great day. We'll see you in the next one.